pretty good team.
That was pretty. It was
What
pretty
made
decent.
that team so good, you two?
Welcome back, Caitlin Clark USA fans. Tonight we are breaking down one of the most intense, pressure-filled, and defining moments in Caitlin Clark's journey on the court, a moment where everyone expected overtime, but she had completely different plans. This is not just about a basketball possession. This is about control, mindset, and the kind of confidence that separates great players from legendary ones. The arena was loud, electric, and restless. Every fan inside knew what was coming next. The game had reached that point where tension becomes heavier than noise. Every possession mattered. Every second felt stretched. And at the center of it all stood Caitlin Clark. She didn't look rushed. She didn't look shaken. But she knew exactly what the clock was doing. Time was slipping away, and the game was trying to force overtime, but she was not interested in letting the story continue. Moments earlier, she had missed a shot she normally finishes without thinking. It was a rare mistake, but in games like this, even small moments start to feel bigger than they are. Defenders had already adjusted. They were tighter now, more aggressive, more willing to gamble on her decisions. They wanted her to pass. They wanted her to hesitate. They wanted overtime. But Caitlin Clark was reading something else entirely. She wasn't just seeing defenders. She was seeing gaps. Small openings. Half-second delays in rotations. Slight shifts in balance. The kind of details most players miss when pressure rises. And in that moment, she understood something very clearly. This wasn't about waiting. This was about deciding. Earlier critics had built a narrative around her game. They said she relied too heavily on deep shots. They said tight moments could expose her decision-making. They said pressure would eventually slow her down. But pressure doesn't break preparation. It reveals it. And Caitlin Clark had been preparing for this exact kind of moment long before the crowd ever showed up. Every early morning workout. Every late-night gym session. Every missed shot that turned into a lesson instead of a failure. It all came back in waves as she held the ball again in those final seconds. The arena noise started to fade in her mind. Not because it disappeared, but because her focus became stronger than it. Sneakers squeaked. Voices shouted. The bench stood ready. But she was locked in. This was no longer about reacting. This was about controlling the ending. The defense shifted slightly. One defender leaned too far left. Another hesitated for just a fraction of a second in rotation. That was all she needed. In high-level basketball, space is never big. It is measured in inches and milliseconds. And Caitlin Clark saw both. Most players in this situation would reset. They would pass the ball. They would drain more time. They would settle for overtime because overtime feels safer than responsibility. But safety was not her mindset. Fear makes players hesitate. Confidence makes players decide. And Caitlin Clark was done waiting for permission from the clock. She took a breath, not a pause of doubt, but a pause of control. The ball felt familiar in her hands. Not heavy. Not stressful. Just ready. She had been here before in different forms. Missed opportunities that taught patience. Tight defenses that taught awareness. Games where hesitation cost results. Those memories were not pressure anymore. They were instruction. And now everything aligned into a single moment. The defender stepped closer. Arms wide. Feet slightly off balance. That was the opening.
But they're not going to do that. And with Noelle Quinn, as you mentioned, no challenge.
Clark.
A window so small it almost didn't exist, but at this level, that is enough. She moved. Dribble. Pivot. Step. No panic. No rush. No unnecessary motion. The crowd rose instantly, sensing something was about to change. Teammates froze for a split second, trusting the decision. Defenders reacted, but they were already late. In elite moments like this, reaction is always behind intention. And Caitlin Clark had already decided the ending. Time slowed for everyone watching, not because the clock changed, but because the moment demanded attention. Every sound became distant. Every movement became magnified. This was the kind of possession that defines careers. She didn't force chaos. She created clarity. And that is what separates great scorers from true leaders. Earlier in the season, conversations had surrounded her performances. Analysts debated her shot selection. Fans argued over her decision-making under pressure. Social media amplified every miss and every highlight. But none of that exists in a moment like this. Because when the game is on the line, opinion disappears. Only execution remains. And execution is built in silence. Hours of training in empty gyms. Repetitions that nobody posts online. Shots taken after fatigue. Movements drilled until instinct takes over thought. That is what showed up in this moment. Not hype. Not luck. Not emotion. Preparation. As she advanced, the defense collapsed slightly inward. That collapse created another gap. Not large. Not obvious. But enough. She didn't overthink it. She didn't overdribble. She didn't search for validation. She acted. The ball came off her hands with confidence, not hesitation. The shot wasn't just a release, it was a decision sealed into motion. Around her, everything froze for a fraction of a second. Then the arena erupted into reaction. Because everyone understood what just happened. This was not a desperate final attempt. This was control. And control is the most dangerous thing in late-game situations. Opponents expected overtime. Fans expected drama. Teammates expected a final reset. But Caitlin Clark expected something different. She expected responsibility. And she embraced it without hesitation. The ball's outcome would tell the final part of the story, but the decision itself already defined everything that mattered. Because at the highest level of competition, the moment is not only judged by result, it is judged by courage. Courage to act when others wait. Courage to trust preparation when doubt is loud. Courage to end the story instead of extending it. And that is exactly what happened here. No overtime. No hesitation. No surrender to pressure. Just a player reading the game, understanding the moment, and deciding that the ending belonged to her. This is Caitlin Clark's identity as a competitor. Not someone who waits for outcomes, but someone who creates them. And in that final possession, she sent a message without speaking a single word. She does not fear the clock. She controls it. Pressure does not define her. She defines pressure. And when the game demanded a hero, she didn't wait to become one. She acted like one.
Here comes Sabali. Clark.
In the kind of silence where thousands of people seemed to stop breathing at the same time, the entire arena in Evanston was frozen in anticipation. It was not just noise fading away, it was something deeper, heavier, almost sacred in its tension. A sold-out crowd had gathered for this moment, for this battle between the Northwestern women's basketball team and the Iowa Hawkeyes, but what they were witnessing now was no longer just a game. It was a story narrowing down to a single decision, a single possession, a single player. Caitlin Clark stood at the center of it all. Before she even made her move, the energy in the building was already stretched to its limit. Fans were leaning forward, bodies tense, eyes locked on every small motion, every shift of her stance. The clock was not just ticking anymore, it was pressing against everyone in the building like a weight nobody could escape. Every second felt like it was pulling the entire arena toward one unavoidable truth: something was about to happen. And Caitlin Clark knew it. But what made her different in this moment was not that she felt the pressure, it was that she understood it, controlled it, and refused to let it decide the ending for her. Earlier in the game, the scoreboard had told a story of constant resistance. Neither team allowed the other to breathe easily. Every basket was answered almost immediately. Every run was matched with another. It felt less like a basketball game and more like a chess match played at full speed, every move calculated, every possession carrying weight far beyond its numbers. No lead was ever truly safe, no moment ever allowed to settle. Somewhere in the second quarter, Caitlin Clark missed a shot she usually makes without hesitation, a clean three-pointer that rimmed out just enough to shift the energy. The defender who closed out on her smiled briefly, a small gesture of confidence, as if trying to send a message. Not tonight. Not this time. But Caitlin Clark did not respond with frustration. She did not slow down. She did not change her rhythm. She simply moved forward. That was always the difference in her game. While others reacted emotionally, she processed everything internally. She watched the defense. She studied spacing. She read body language. Every possession became a lesson, every mistake a reference point, every adjustment a quiet evolution in real time. Pressure had been following her all season long. Every away game seemed louder than the last. Every gym felt tighter, every crowd more hostile, every defensive scheme more focused. Opposing teams did not just prepare for Iowa, they prepared specifically for her. Double teams came early, sometimes before she even crossed half court. Traps were waiting like traps are meant to wait, patient, aggressive, designed to force panic. But panic never arrived. Instead, Caitlin Clark leaned into the pressure. She treated it not as something meant to break her, but as something meant to reveal her. Every screen she navigated became a test. Every closeout became an opportunity. Every possession under pressure became another layer of proof that she belonged exactly where she was. For many players, this kind of environment becomes overwhelming. The noise grows louder than thought. The game speeds up beyond control. Decisions become rushed, uncertain, reactive. But Caitlin Clark was not playing from reaction, she was playing from understanding. Even when she was off the ball, her eyes never stopped moving. She read rotations before they fully formed. She recognized hesitation in defenders before it became visible to others. She noticed small gaps that existed for fractions of seconds, openings that most players never even register. The game was not chaos to her. It was structure waiting to be solved. And every experience she had ever lived through on the court had led her here. There were nights earlier in her career when nothing worked. Shots that normally fell cleanly suddenly rolled out. Passes were intercepted before they developed. Defensive pressure felt overwhelming, almost suffocating. Critics used those moments to question her decision-making, her shot selection, her ability to handle tight situations. Social media amplified every mistake, every missed shot, every perceived flaw. But none of that stayed with her the way people expected it to. Because Caitlin Clark did not carry criticism the way others did. She transformed it into repetition, into training, into focus. Early mornings in empty gyms became her response. Late-night shooting sessions became her correction. Every missed shot became a note in a larger system of improvement. Over time, pressure stopped being something external. It became something familiar. And familiarity removes fear. As the final minutes of this game arrived, the tension inside the arena reached a level where even sound seemed distorted. Every movement on the court felt slower to the crowd, as if reality itself was stretching to accommodate.
And that's the way to push the ball in transition. Oh, that's not gonna waste.
The importance of what was about to happen. Fans expected overtime. Coaches expected a structured final possession. Defenders expected hesitation, maybe even a forced pass. But Caitlin Clark expected none of those things. She expected responsibility. With the ball in her hands, she felt the entire game compress into a single point of focus. The clock was still there, but it no longer controlled her thinking. Instead, it became just another piece of information, useful, but not dominant. She scanned the floor one last time. A defender stood slightly too upright. Another was half a step late, rotating back into position. A third hesitated, unsure whether to commit or recover. Those were not mistakes. They were opportunities. And Caitlin Clark did not hesitate to recognize them. In moments like this, most players slow down. They search for safety. They pass responsibility away. They try to extend the game into overtime because overtime feels like another chance, another escape from finality. But greatness does not seek escape. It seeks control. And control requires decision. She dribbled once. Then again. A slight pivot. A shift in balance. The defense reacted, but they were already late. That is the reality of elite timing. When the decision is made at the right moment, reaction becomes irrelevant. Time itself felt distorted inside the arena. The crowd rose slightly, anticipating the outcome before it even fully unfolded. Teammates froze, trusting what was coming. Opponents extended arms, lunging into space that was already gone. And in that moment, Caitlin Clark acted. Not with panic. Not with desperation. But with certainty. The ball left her hands with calm precision, a release built not in that moment alone, but in years of preparation that led directly to it. Thousands of repetitions, countless hours of training, missed shots that became corrections, successes that became expectations. Everything funneled into that single motion. For a brief moment, everything stopped. The arena waited. No sound. No reaction. Just silence stretched to its limit. And then the shot fell. The net snapped. The silence broke. The arena erupted. But Caitlin Clark did not react the way the crowd did. There was no dramatic celebration, no exaggerated emotion. Just focus. Just composure. Just the quiet understanding that this was not luck, not chance, not randomness. This was preparation meeting opportunity. This was discipline becoming visible. This moment would be replayed endlessly. Analysts would break it down frame by frame. Fans would relive it from different angles. Young athletes would study it, trying to understand how pressure could be transformed into control. But the truth would remain simple beneath all the analysis. She did not wait for the perfect moment. She created it. Because legends are not defined by the absence of pressure. They are defined by what they do inside it. And in Evanston that night, Caitlin Clark did not choose overtime. She chose certainty. She chose responsibility. She chose the ending. And in doing so, she reminded everyone watching that pressure does not decide greatness. Greatness decides pressure.
And laid it in, she's got 20.
In the kind of silence where thousands of people inside an arena forget how to breathe at the same time, everything slows down into something almost unreal. It is not just quiet, it is anticipation so heavy that it feels physical, like the air itself is waiting for permission to move again. The sold-out crowd in Evanston had no more words left. No more reactions left. Only expectation. Only tension. Only a final possession that felt like it could decide more than just a game. Caitlin Clark stood at the center of it all, not as someone overwhelmed by the moment, but as someone fully aware of its weight. Her eyes were locked on the court, but her mind was already moving ahead of everyone else in the building. The scoreboard no longer mattered. The statistics no longer mattered. Even the noise that had defined the entire night was starting to fade into something distant and irrelevant. What mattered now was decision. Because in basketball at this level, moments like this are never random. They are built. They are earned. And they are claimed by the player who refuses to let fear make the choice for them. Earlier in the game, everything had been a battle of control. Every possession felt like a response to the previous one. Iowa would score. Northwestern would answer. A three-pointer would be met with a drive. A fast break would be countered with a set play. Nothing ever settled. Nothing ever felt safe. It was the kind of game where momentum didn't belong to either side. It just moved back and forth like a living thing, constantly searching for stability but never finding it. And through all of it, Caitlin Clark was being tested in ways that went far beyond the box score. From the very first quarter, defenders made it clear that she was not going to be allowed comfort. Every time she crossed half court, there was pressure waiting. Every time she moved without the ball, eyes followed her like she was the only threat that mattered. Double teams came early, sometimes too early. Rotations were aggressive, sometimes reckless. The message was simple. If she wanted control of the game, she would have to earn every inch of it. And she did. But not in the way most players do. Because Caitlin Clark doesn't just react to pressure, she studies it, absorbs it, and then uses it as information. Somewhere in the second quarter, there was a moment that looked insignificant at first, but would later fit perfectly into the larger story. A clean three-point look appeared. The kind she has made hundreds of times before without hesitation. But this time, it didn't fall. The shot hit the rim and bounced out. Just a miss. Nothing dramatic. Nothing emotional. But the defender closest to her reacted differently. A small smile. A brief moment of confidence. A silent assumption that maybe this was going to be one of those nights where even the best can be disrupted. But Caitlin Clark didn't respond to that moment at all. She didn't argue with it. She didn't chase it. She didn't try to prove anything on the next possession. She simply moved on. That is what separates elite players from everyone else. the ability to let failure stay in the past instead of dragging it into the next possession. From that point forward, her game shifted into something more controlled, more calculated, more patient. She wasn't forcing the game anymore. She was reading it. Every screen became information. Every switch became data. Every defensive hesitation became an opportunity waiting to be exploited later. And the pressure didn't stop growing. If anything, it intensified as the game continued. Opposing teams don't just play against Caitlin Clark, they prepare for her presence specifically. Defensive schemes become tighter. Help defense becomes faster. Transition coverage becomes sharper. It's not just about stopping her shot, it's about disrupting her rhythm, breaking her timing, forcing her into decisions that feel uncomfortable. But the problem with that strategy is simple. Discomfort is not unfamiliar territory for her, because she has lived in it for years. There were nights early in her career where nothing looked easy, where shots that normally dropped refused to fall, where passes were anticipated before they developed, where defenses felt like walls instead of challenges. Those nights didn't break her, they built her. And while critics often pointed to those moments as flaws, she treated them as education. Missed shots became corrections. Turnovers became lessons. Defensive pressure became film study material. And slowly, over time, everything started to connect. The gym sessions nobody saw. The early mornings before anyone else arrived. The late nights when the arena was empty except for a ball and a rim. That is where the foundation was built. Not in the spotlight. In silence. So when this moment arrived, the final stretch of a tightly contested game with the entire arena locked in uncertainty, there was no panic in her. No rush. No confusion. Only recognition.
And it's not about your competition, who you're playing. It's about being confident in.
Because she had been here before, mentally, thousands of times. As the clock began to shrink into its final seconds, everything inside the arena changed. Fans rose slightly from their seats without even realizing it. Coaches leaned forward. Bench players stopped talking. Every movement became smaller, more careful, more controlled. The game had reached its final form, one possession deciding everything. Most players, in this situation, look for safety. They look for a pass. They look for an extra second. They look for overtime as a relief from responsibility. But Caitlin Clark was not looking for relief. She was looking for control. And control requires ownership of the moment. She dribbled at the top, calm and deliberate, reading the defense like it was a language she had learned long ago. One defender was slightly too upright. Another was a half-step late rotating back. A third was hesitating between helping and staying home. That hesitation was all she needed. Because at this level, hesitation is not just weakness, it is opportunity. The crowd began to rise further as the possession developed. The noise started to return, but not as chaos. As anticipation. As disbelief building toward recognition. Something was about to happen, and everyone could feel it without knowing exactly what. A final screen was set. A slight shift of space opened just enough. Not wide. Not obvious. Just enough. And in that moment, the game stopped being about strategy. It became about trust. Trust in preparation. Trust in repetition. Trust in everything she had done before this second. She didn't look at the clock again. She didn't search for reassurance. She didn't wait for the defense to fully settle. She moved. One dribble. A pivot. A small adjustment of her feet that created separation that didn't exist a second earlier. The defender reacted, but reaction is always late when the decision is already made. And then came the release. No hesitation. No extra motion. No unnecessary force. Just a shot born from repetition so deep that it no longer required thought. The ball left her hands with a calmness that contrasted completely with the chaos around her. It rose into the air while the entire arena seemed to freeze underneath it. Teammates stopped moving. Opponents held their positions. Fans leaned forward in collective uncertainty. And for a brief moment, time stopped belonging to anyone. It belonged only to the arc of the ball. Some would later describe it as slow motion. Others as a blur. But for Caitlin Clark, it was clarity. Absolute clarity. Because once the ball left her hands, The decision was no longer uncertain. It was complete. The shot traveled through silence so thick it felt unreal. And then the net moved. That single sound broke everything. The arena exploded instantly, but even in that explosion, there was disbelief mixed with realization. Some fans jumped. Some froze. Some simply stared, trying to process what had just happened in front of them. Because this was not just a basket. It was a decision made under maximum pressure and executed without hesitation. It was the difference between waiting for overtime and refusing to allow it. It was control in its purest form. Caitlin Clark didn't react dramatically. She didn't need to. Her expression remained steady, focused, almost detached from the emotional wave that hit everyone else. Because for her, the moment wasn't about surprise. It was about confirmation. Confirmation that preparation works. That repetition matters. That belief under pressure is not theory, it is practice expressed in real time. And as teammates rushed toward her, as opponents processed what had just happened, as the crowd turned from silence into chaos, one truth became clear inside that arena. The game had not ended by chance. It had ended by choice. And that choice belonged to her. Caitlin Clark didn't wait for overtime. She created an ending. And that is what separates moments from legacies.